YouTube? It's your girl DeeDee. Welcome back to the channel. So I'm back with another quick rant for you guys. Listen, a lot of black women are wondering why they are the least desirable when it comes to dating and men. And there are some women who are in denial about this. And I will say this is not, as a black woman, this is not something that you should be excited about. This is not something that I'm happy to present here. This is not something that I think should be celebrated, but I think we need to acknowledge the root of the cause of certain issues and why they are what they are and where they stem from. If you don't understand how something occurs, the natural thing to do is to find out why it got to the point to where it is. How did we get here? Why is it that black women are looked at as the least desirable? Why is it that, black women amongst all races of men are considered the least desirable? And, as a black woman, even though I'm married, I still have daughters, and I want to know how people are looking at us to try to gauge and get an understanding of why black women are put in this category. But in order to do that, you can't be delusional. You can't be in this state of no accountability. You can't just sit around and think that there is no fault when it comes to you, or there's no position or a place that you can think of as black women of how you could have contributed to this in some way, shape, or form. Even if you think it's so minuscule, there's still a part that we have to acknowledge that black women have played in this. And if and we got to stop always going to black men. Black men have their part as well. And we've definitely called them out on their part and their lack and, in the areas that they can work on. We've been calling them out for years. But I always say we've never really held black women and brought them to the forefront. We've always kind of coddled black women and made excuses for them. But, we're to a point now to where you have to acknowledge certain things about yourself that may contribute to the problem. And there's nothing wrong with that. In every situation, you have to acknowledge that there is some issue there. If you can acknowledge that you come from a broken home, or you came from a toxic environment and you weren't given the tools that you needed to succeed, or you didn't have both parents in your household, your mother was, a lying, conniving, a liar, to you, or she wasn't the best to you, you don't have a good relationship with your father or your mother, or, you've grown up in some real, horrible situations that kind of lended itself to how you think and where you are as an adult. If you can acknowledge that you've had some struggles in the past, and you certainly can acknowledge that a lot of those struggles that you've had to deal with contributed to your mentality and how you may act as an adult. We can't acknowledge one struggle but ignore the other. And, I can definitely say that from my own perspective, growing up in a single parent household with a mother who had certain views, that were not really conducive to healthy relationships, or had certain views on men and women, certainly contributed to how, I thought as an adult coming into adulthood, young adulthood, of how I looked at the world and how I looked at men versus women. And it was not a positive outcome. But one thing I realized that I had to do is start to retrain the way I think, because for one, I didn't have any experiences. I only had what was taught to me. So when you go off of what was taught to you without the experience, without experiencing that, especially if it's negative, you have an already skewed idea of men and the world based off of what was told to you, even though you haven't experienced that. It's sort of like teaching your children to be racist, and they've never encountered a black person. They've never dealt with a black person that's never done them anything. But your parents are teaching you to be racist toward a group of people that you've never met, never come encounter with. And so you already have a preconceived notion of what to expect from these people based off of what you were taught. Then fast forward, you actually meet black people who were nothing but nice and gracious to you and treated you well. Well, that's going to give you a confusing signal to your brain, because you're like, wait a minute, I was taught a certain way, that this is how these people are going to treat you. This is what they're going to be. But they've never done that or been that way to me. So your experience tells you something different from what you was taught. So now there's a conflict here. So now you got to try to weigh what you was taught versus what you've experienced. Who do you believe? Why would this person? Now it's denial, because why would this person who cares about you lead you astray? Why would they tell you something that you realize is not really the truth, or that's not your experience? So every situation is not the same. So that's something you had to come to grips with. And I had to come to grips with that. Hey, I have to experience things for myself. I have to make better decisions. I have to choose wisely and go through a thing in order to see it through, and realize that the situations that I put myself in were not exactly the same situations that my mother or that my relatives went through. So I can't use their examples to gauge what I should be doing, because it's a totally different experience. And so because I have a totally different experience off of my choices, I have a totally different outcome. So we can't just use other people's examples and put it onto us and believe that this is what we should be doing based off of what they went. No, because you have a choice to make better decisions. You don't make the decisions that they made that landed them where they are. You make different ones that land you somewhere else. So I say all that to say you have to make better decisions, go through the process, you know what I'm saying? And choose wisely, pick better, stop thinking the negative, all the negative outcomes, and start thinking positive so that you can get positive outcomes. It's not, you know what I'm saying? It's not one way. It's not just one way to go about what it is that you're looking for. And if you want a certain outcome, you work towards it. Don't, just, think that it's, that it's all about what somebody else tell you. You know what I'm saying? So I just think that we got to do better. We got to start being accountable for our actions. We got to start realizing that we hold a part in all of this as well, that we are not exempt from making changes to do better, that all of the issues doesn't just stem from men, but you have a part to play in it too. It takes two. You got to consider that you may have a nasty attitude, that you don't know how to resolve conflict, that you've never been taught these things. So if you've never been taught them, how do you expect to be good at them? So if you're not good at it, why would you expect him to be good at it? So it's like you got to start to look at the overall picture and understand that it takes two, that is not just about you, but it's about the whole of the situation, that you have to work together in order to establish something, and that you can't do that alone. So, it's just something to think about and something to consider, and understand the bigger picture in all of this, and that, hey, none of us are perfect. We are all works in progress. We all have to work to a common greater goal. And if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to take accountability, if you're not willing to look at yourself and acknowledge that you play a part in all of this, and that it's not all just a one-sided thing, then it's only going to get worse. It's not going to yield better results. But if you're willing to be open and truthful about what it is that you want, and be willing to make the necessary changes in order to get it, then we can finally get somewhere. So I took this conversation somewhere else, but listen, hopefully it helps somebody. Hopefully, I'm lending an ear to somebody to listen to maybe get a different perspective on this and maybe do better. That's it. So, yeah.